Hey folks, Matt here, and today I'll be reacting to the passing of Ozzy Osbourne, as well as his legacy as one of the forefathers of heavy metal. I'll be going through some articles on his death and career, and then after I'll share some of my own memories connected to both his music with Black Sabbath and his solo band. Definitely stick around. All right, so I'm going to do 4 articles only. I'm not going to read them all the way through. If you want to do that, I'm going to provide links to each and every one of them in the description of this video so you can read them to your heart's content. I'm really just going to skim through them, point out some things that kind of stuck out for me. And of course, later, as I said, I'm going to also talk about Ozzy's memory through discovering his music, both in Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne. So stay tuned for that. I'll show records too, as I am wont to do. Anyways, Ozzy Osbourne led Black Sabbath and became the godfather. Heavy metal dies at 76. Obviously, there was a video here. I have it blocked. Yeah, so the family posted, it was with more sadness than mere words can convey, that we have reported that our beloved Ozzy Osbourne has passed away this morning. He was with his family and surrounded by love. We ask everyone to respect our family privacy at this time. Family statement. Makes sense. How I felt about it when I first heard the news, clearly a little bit shaken. I reacted more initially to the death a little bit more than I thought I would, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this video, to be honest. But I also wanted to dig more into these stories and see how other people felt, and also see what it kind of brings up for me as well. So let's see, the targeted parents groups for his imagery. One's caused uproar for biting the head off a bat, which is great. And of course, the Osbournes. We'll talk about the Osbournes TV show a little bit later. 69 self-titled album likened to the Big Bang of heavy metal. Agreed. Black Sabbath started heavy metal, and we'll get deeper into that argument later, for sure. Music was loud, dense, and angry, marking a shift in rock and roll. Indeed, it was a shift in the culture as well. Because the 60s kind of ended, literally chronologically, but also culturally were over by that time period. Black Sabbath came in at a very interesting time. In fact, I think Ozzy in one interview had said that they were the last hippie band, which is interesting because I don't hear so much peace and love. There are a few tracks here and there, but Sabbath is dark, really dark. I mean, Jefferson Airplane wasn't singing about Satan. So there you go. Let's see, the band's second album, Paranoid, included such classic tunes as War Pigs, Iron Man, and Fairies Wear Boots. Great tracks. Some might say they're played to death. Some people are kind of tired of them. I think that's why Paranoid gets kind of shoved to the side a little bit in modern day. I had my own dealings with Paranoid. I feel like more in modern day, I've kind of come around a little bit more. I do respect the album and do like it too. I did buy the box set. It's back there somewhere. Paranoid reached number 61 on the Billboard Hot 100. It says only reached, which is interesting. I think that's, I don't know, only reached? I think for the type of band they are and the time period that it happened, 61 is pretty good out of 100. A lot of bands don't even break the top 100. So there you go. Top 10 greatest heavy metal albums of all times by readers of Rolling Stone magazine, which is pretty cool. Rolling Stone was not always amenable to heavy music. Talk to Kiss about that and other bands as well. And they kind of came around as well. There were some reviewers in the early days who did not like Black Sabbath, and Rolling Stone might have had a couple. I don't think Lester Bangs liked Sabbath, if I'm remembering correctly. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. There's a direct line that you can draw back from today's metal through 80s bands like Iron Maiden back to Sabbath. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when I start showing albums and such. Dave Navarro, Jane's Addiction, said that. Agreed. Fully agreed. No Sabbath, no metal. So there we go. This is interesting. Sabbath fired Osbourne in 1979 for his legendary excesses, like showing up late for rehearsals and missing gigs. I think it goes a little deeper than that. And I think there is another article that kind of corrects that a little bit more, or elucidates a little bit more. Let's be honest. Ozzy was on drugs and he was unmanageable. I don't think just showing up tardy for gigs and recordings is the only problem that the band had with Ozzy. He was a flawed individual, let's be honest, and I'm going to talk about those flaws a little bit more. Balanced with the good stuff. This isn't a character assassination of Ozzy Osbourne by any stretch. I'm doing this video for a reason. It's out of respect, ultimately. So, Let's see. We knew we didn't really have a choice but to sack him because he was just so out of control, which is more the point. Yeah. Geezer talks about this in his book Into the Void, which I have somewhere on my shelf. It's too far away to get, but I do have it. I've been meaning to read it. Looks like a pretty good book. So there you go. I know Bob Daisley has a book out too, speaking of bass players who had relationships with Ozzy. Daisley's a little less amenable than Geezer's probably. But yeah, I can't remember the name of that book. Someone will remind me in the comments. Let's see, Blizzard of Oz, Diary of Madman, all of that, all the songs. Let's see, Osbourne was twice inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, once with Sabbath in 2006, and again in 2024 as a solo artist. I think that's really cool, and I do think it's kind of deserving. Some people discredit Ozzy here and there, and again, I mean, if we're talking about Black Sabbath, I mean, Iommi and Butler really wrote the lion's share of everything. Ozzy wrote some vocal melodies, but Geezer wrote most of the lyrics. Iommi wrote a lot of the music along with Geezer. And of course, you can't count Bill Ward out with those amazing beats of his, kind of jazzy, but pretty heavy too, and all of that. Let's see, 42,000 fans. This was the Back to the Beginning show, which we're going to talk a little bit more about as well. I wasn't really excited about a lot of the bands that played, but I thought I'll give it to Metallica for doing some deep cuts, some really deep cuts. Guns N' Roses tried, there's Axl Rose and his compromised voice, let's put it that way. They did some interesting deep cuts as well. Slayer was probably the star of the show in a lot of ways, outside of Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath. I mean, counting them out. Interesting stuff. I thought Aerosmith, Steven Tyler was amazing. I don't know if you actually saw the whole 10 to 11 hour event. I did. I actually got the pay-per-view and watched the whole thing. I think it was 11 hours total. It was 10 hours on pay-per-view because it was a 3-hour delay so they could edit some crap out and cut it down by an hour. I feel that's what they did. Ronnie Wood was a real surprise. Wasn't expecting the Rolling Stones guy to show up. Sammy Hagar was okay. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Except for Jason Momoa in the pit was probably one of the best visuals. For sure. Let's see. The Alamo. We're going to talk about the Alamo a little bit later. Starting the line of ants off a sidewalk. That's fun. That was when Ozzy was on tour with Motley Crue. It was Bark at the Moon for Ozzy and Shot at the Devil for Motley Crue. Unfortunately, what sucks is that I actually saw that tour, but Motley Crue had already got bumped off by then and I had Accept instead. And it was my very first metal show. I'm going to probably mention that again later. But yeah, so it would have been fun to see the Crew. I actually caught the Crew on Theater of Pain the next year, but that would have been a fun show. Anyways, there was this whole thing about snorting ants, but also drinking each other's piss and like all sorts of like trying to outgross each other and try to top each other. Most of it was Nikki and Ozzy, but like Tommy Lee was in the mix as well. Fun stories. You can look them up if you don't know them already. Ozzy sued in 1987 my parents of a 19-year-old teen who died by suicide while listening to his song Suicide Solution. Interesting thing, and I remember thinking this back in 1987, was that the kid was in his car. It was a car or a truck, and he was playing the cassette version of it. And I thought to myself, well, if he doesn't have auto reverse on his stereo, side one ends with Suicide Solution. So do you just assume the last song of the tape is the song he killed himself to? Maybe it was I Don't Know. Maybe it was Crazy Train. We don't know. But the word suicide's in there, so that's what they're going to go with, obviously. It's funny. Ozzy said the song was really about the dangers of alcohol, which it was. Bon Scott was probably the inspiration for that. Yes, it was. Yeah. So, yeah. People misinterpret Ozzy a lot. It's funny. I think later we might talk about his satanic thing, which is, bullshit. He's a Christian. He's very Christian in some of his lyrics, too. Even in Black Sabbath, I might add. We might get into that later. Cardinal O'Connor in 1990 claimed that his songs led to demonic possession, even suicide. Demonic possession. Fantastic. 1990, we're already starting to pull at the tail end of the Satanic Panic and a lot of the religious right's power, cultural power, which is pretty interesting. Maybe that's some last-ditch effort stuff. I don't know. Yep. Husband usually send the crowds home, bringing a hefty, God bless you all. It's like he almost invented the phrase, but he didn't, right? He also wants to see our hands, and he used to want us to keep on smoking it, right? The 3 things Ozzy wants of us, as I've said before in other videos. Lollapalooza, not Ozfest was like a Lollapalooza, rather. Ozfest in the 90s, the mid-90s. I never saw an Ozfest, ever. My problem with some of the festivals back then, and America didn't have it as much until I think this point, but Europe had it, and I think this is a cultural difference, is that festivals here where the bands made more sense together, like it made sense to some degree. In Europe, I would look at the bills on festivals, usually it'd be in Kerrang magazine for me. That's how I'd find out about European festivals. And the bills were like, these sort of hair metal bands and then thrash bands. And you're like, really? Right. So I think, I mean, I'm seeing Ozzy, I see, I mean, you've got the usuals, right? But then you have Linkin Park and Limp Bizkit. Like, if I wanted to see Ozzy and Megadeth, I really think those are the last two bands on the planet I really want to see. So you have to weigh your options about paying a lot of money to see a festival show. And I think in the mid 90s and on, I think that some of that was my rationale. I also wasn't going to as many shows. You've probably seen my video on my dropping out of modern metal for a little bit and then coming back after a decade. So some of this kind of factors into that. You can watch that video, you'll find it. Lots of people don't like it. I don't know why. So anyways, let's see. Ozzy changed his image over time. Of course he's going to. He's older. Black Sabbath 13, that album, it's really funny. I've listened to it a lot more in recent years, and it's not a bad album. Musically, if you take the singers out, musically, there's a lot of overlap between that and The Devil You Know, which is the Heaven and Hell Dio thing. Yeah, take the voices out and you can hear it, because it's really just Iommi, and Butler and those guys. It's not a bad album. In fact, if you kind of pushed 13 aside over the years, I would actually ask you to revisit a little bit because it's really not as bad as everyone says it is. It's not perfect, mind you, but it's not really awful either. Let's see, 2020 released the album Ordinary Man. Didn't buy it. I know there's also a mention of the album after that. Also didn't buy it. Have a hard time with it. It's strange because, I mean, look, Elton John's on the record and Clapton and Beck. I mean, I think that's more Ozzy's generation than ours and younger people's generations as well. I don't know how attuned millennials and, and the others are to like Clapton and Beck. I mean, that's really just Ozzy's generation. That's a boomer thing, right? Those are boomer things. I mean, you put some other people in here, Trujillo, whom he had in Ozzy before, and the guy from Chili Peppers, and Duff McKagan, who's great. Duff McKagan is the heart of Guns N' Roses, in my opinion, by the way. He's the best thing about that band. Yeah, Osbourne won 5 Grammys over his lifetime, which is pretty cool. I think the first one was in 93. I think it's in another article we're going to look at. But yeah, I don't need to go through so much of the history of Black Sabbath here. I'm going to kind of because we all know about the history of Black Sabbath. The controversy stuff is pretty fun. Again, Jimmy Swaggart, he wrote a song about him called Miracle Man. Incidentally, Jimmy Swaggart died a few weeks before Ozzy did, I believe. I think it was this year. Maybe it wasn't. I think it was. But he's gone. So Ozzy outlived Swaggart. That's kind of fun. The Osbournes TV show, of course. We can get into the Osbourne show a little bit. I did watch it kind of as a curiosity. I think the one thing I thought initially when I watched the Osbournes for the first time and seeing clearly Ozzy's performance, condition, what have you, was that this is kind of destroying my hero in my brain a little bit, right? Because you want him to be, the Madman and, and that iconic guy. And, he's this doddering old dude, right? And I say old, which is really funny because 20 years ago, Ozzy Osbourne was my age now. I'm like, I don't dodder. I don't think I do. But, I also don't have early stage Parkinson's. I didn't abuse drugs left and right. In fact, I didn't abuse drugs at all. So maybe that was a good thing. Right. So, we just sort of skip through this. Ozzy and Jack's World Detour. I watched a couple episodes. It was fine. It's more like a father-son bonding moment captured on video. I feel like that's more of what it is. I'm sure Jack is going to watch those episodes a lot more now that his dad's gone. And yeah, I would assume, because those are going to be good memories for Jack, I think. So, yeah, playing at the Queen Elizabeth II Golden Jubilee weekend, that was interesting. Yeah, that'll be fun. You can look up more into that. Yeah, and some other stuff about his kids he had with the previous wife. There was an adopted son. There might have been 2 adopted kids. I can't remember, but there you go. Jumping quickly to the second article. Yeah, this is from The Guardian, a paper I don't like at all, but we're gonna go to the story anyways. Let's see. I'm trying to remember the origin of the Prince of Darkness moniker. Does anyone else remember? Remind me in the comments. I remember he just said it one time, and I feel like that's when it stuck basically, but I can't remember when. And I didn't look it up beforehand. So someone tell me in the comments the first time he ever used that phrase. I think he was the one that used it first. Um, yep, we've read that before. Yeah, yeah, he had a tough upbringing, a little bit. I mean, he was dyslexic. He got abused as a kid. Yeah, crazy. I think it's all the more. I think the cool thing about Ozzy, he's kind of an everyman, but he had a rough life, and I feel like he's got that real rags to riches story that everyone can really appreciate, especially if you've been through a rough childhood. Mine was decent. It wasn't perfect by any stretch, but I know a lot of friends of mine who had really abusive childhoods and really crazy stuff. Like they probably had psychopaths for parents, kind of stuff. And you can appreciate it when you see this sort of rags to riches thing for Ozzy. Like he deserves it. Their bands I don't always feel really deserve the accolades they get or even the success that they have. I'm sure you can pick many bands who fit that bill, but I just don't buy it with Ozzy and Black Sabbath as well. I mean, they came out of Birmingham, they came out of the factories and poverty and all sorts of just dismal surroundings, right? Yeah. I love this. Geezer Butler says, we didn't want to write happy pop songs. We gave that industrial feeling to it. Of course, the industrial, the factories. Rob Halford has that same story with Judas Priest. He talks about the foundries and the clanging of metal, and that sort of inspire him. But also sort of, there's sort of that darkness about that life that kind of makes its way into the music of Black Sabbath and other bands as well later. But yeah, industrial, of course, meaning something slightly different than it meant in the 1990s, of course. Named after a Boris Karloff movie, Black Sabbath. It's an okay movie, I think, as far as Karloff films go. There's better stuff out there for sure. But it's a great name for a band, right? Black Sabbath, right? Great. Awesome. Let's see. I'm just going to quickly skip through this a little bit more. Bit the head off a dead bat. Other articles are saying it was a live bat. It was not. So the kid who brought it, I can't remember how old he was. I want to say he was a teenager, but I can't recall. The bat was already dead. It was frozen. He thought he froze it because he was planning on doing something with it. This is actually what he planned to do. And so the bat was kind of half thawed when it got tossed at Ozzy. And that's kind of probably why he thought it was rubber, because it didn't move, right? Because it was dead. So it's funny when they say it's a live bat. I think there's another article that said that here. I'm just like, get your facts straight. Let's see. Yeah, the two doves thing at the record label meeting literally bit the heads off two bats, which probably legitimized the doves rather. He bit the head off two doves, which probably legitimized the bat story a little bit more. Maybe the bat was alive, right? Just like the doves, right? People love to conflate things, especially the media. So. Yeah, that's a weird moment. Like the biting the heads off the doves for like was it a promotional stunt or I don't know what it was. But yeah, who knows? Let's see. 80s and 90s, he had hits in the UK, Bark at the Moon, Perry Mason. Interesting. This is really weird, right? He eventually hit a #1 in 2003 with Changes, a duet with daughter Kelly. I've heard that it's okay. Lyrics were a little embellished, I think, with her in specifics, but yeah, it's okay. I think it's just one of those things where he loved his daughter, so they're going to do the song. And I do know, because I did read some other stuff with Kelly, she did quote the song Changes in her social media in relation to her dad. It's I lost the best friend I ever had, which is really sad. I mean, you got to have a heart, right? So let's see what else we got here. Yeah, I forgot all about the arrested for trying to strangle Sharon, trying to murder her, actually. This article I know has a little bit more the dark side of Ozzy in his life. Like, Ozzy wasn't a happy-go-lucky dude. I mean, even after that miserable childhood of his, he still had demons, lots of them. And they were fueled by drugs and booze, but just probably about anger and resentment, And it's interesting how fame doesn't always take that away magically. People still carry their problems into their success. I mean, Paul Stanley of Kiss, with the deformed ear thing and not being a big fan with the girls back when he was a teenager as a result, and him sort of getting revenge in Kiss by, being successful and feeling better about himself. And yeah, you can read Paul Stanley's book. What is it called? I have it up here somewhere. Face the Music is what it's called. Interesting stuff. So rock stars with the problems, they bring them into their bands. That's a thing. Again, the Osbournes, 2002, 2005, which actually means Ozzy was younger than I am when he started, because 2002, what was he, 48? So I'm not going to do the math, but he's 20 years older than I am to the year. So yeah. The quad biking accident is interesting. I remember reading about that. It spurred on the Parkinson's, aided it, I guess. I don't understand the disease very well, but that's kind of what I read. Straighten me out in the comments if I'm really off base about that, but I think that happened. No more tours. 2. I love that, right? We're not going to tour anymore, but now we're going to tour again no more, right? But after that, right? And everyone's done that, right? I mean, Motley Crue and Kiss, right? Yeah. I think it's really fun. I think there's something almost Spinal Tap about it, because now there's this new movie, Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues. I love that. I feel like they're almost taking a shot at that a little bit in their own sort of, mockumentary stuff they do. But, yeah. Yeah, not a happy dude all the time, Everything I touch is turned to shit, right? So I think if you're going to really examine Ozzy Osbourne, you got to look at that side of him too. And then the Parkinson's kicked in. It's amazing how long he lived. Like, I feel like Ozzy just lived on a combination of just drive and just dedication to his music and his fans, because he's one of those people, like kind of like Ronnie James Dio. He's one of those people who really loved his fans and really wanted to be out there and performing, and they kind of both were out there almost to the end. I think Dio, not as much. I think Dio wasn't out there the day, however many days before he died, unfortunately. But yeah. Pretty cool in that sense, that drive, that the perseverance. I really appreciate, respect that a lot. I'm going to jump to the next article because this is the end of it right here. CNN, Godfather heavy metal. He is indeed. Went through that. They're going to go through some more. This is interesting. This throwing raw meat onto concert goers. He did do that actually on the Diary of Madman tour. He threw meat at people. They threw things back at him, which of course accounts for the bad as well, right? I always think of that with Wasp, right? Wasp is the meat thrower band, and they did it during their first tour, but then they kind of stopped and replaced it with Blackie Lawless's flaming crotch thing that he had. It was an Inside the Electric Circus tour. I can't remember. Was it that tour? Yeah. It actually caught his crotch on fire. That's a great story. Yeah. 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 Gimmicks go wrong with metal bands. Great stuff. Of course. Yeah. Son of a toolmaker and a factory worker. It's a cool story in that regard, right? Again, the rags to riches, that whole, like, the everyman does good, I think a lot of us can get behind that, especially if, we're trying to sort of concentrate on our own success in life and our own sort of, push to do things, Let's see. Yeah, this is a lot of history stuff. A lot of people know. Again, you can read these articles. I'll have them linked. This is interesting. I thought this paragraph was really fascinating. This is Ozzy here. I have never, ever, ever been able to attach myself to the word heavy metal. It has no musical connotations. It was heavy rock, I could get that, but the 70s was kind of a bluesy thing. The 80s was kind of bubblegum frosted hair, multicolored clothes, and the 90s was kind of grungy. There's some half-truth in that, but saying Ozzy Osbourne isn't heavy metal is disingenuous. I mean, even if he doesn't want to admit it, he stuck with it. I mean, go listen to those albums again. And go listen to how influential both Black Sabbath and Ozzy's solo bands were on metal. They were really influential. I mean, Randy Rhoads' guitar playing even in his solo band, I hear it in other players a lot, even modern players. So it's kind of interesting. But we heard a similar thing from Lemmy, too. Lemmy never wanted to be attached to heavy metal. It's just sort of motorhead rock and roll kind of thing, he would always say. And Lemmy and Ozzy were friends, by the way, good friends. They did that Hellraiser track together. Lemmy helped write, I think, the lyrics to Mama, I'm Coming Home, some other stuff. They did some other collab stuff. So yeah, it's interesting, right? But even in death, Ozzy, you're stuck with this label. You just are, right? So yeah. Anyways, I just wanted to kind of point that one out. Fire from Black Sabbath, over alcohol and drug abuse. At least CNN gets it kind of right, right? Yep. And there are a lot of stories like that where, people get kicked out of bands for that kind of stuff. I mean, Pete Willis from Def Leppard, who else? Dave Mustaine from Metallica at the time, then wanted to do Megadeth. Um, Tons of other people too. I'm trying to think of some others, but you'll think of some in the comments. Sometimes right before the band makes it. In Ozzy's case, though, is interesting because Sabbath was on the fall. I mean, they were on the decline, and they put a couple albums that really didn't do all that well. So it's weird to almost think that Ozzy's firing in '79 was almost fortuitous, because it was what led to the solo career. With Sharon's help and other stuff and other people, but pretty interesting. Yeah. I mean, Dave Mustaine has the story too, where he succeeds again in life with Megadeth after being kicked out of Metallica. So it's nice when you can see that. Again, there's the everyman, right? He falls and then he rises again and becomes even bigger. I mean, let's be honest, right? Maybe we'll talk about that more later. What do bats taste like? They ask him in interviews. I believe he said salty to, what was it? Was it Night Flight? That great interview on Night Flight. Find it on YouTube. It's pretty amazing. It's already shaved his head. And he's just whacked out of his mind. It's a pretty great interview. Yeah, we talked. It's a little salty. It's great. Yep. Go find that interview. It was on Night Flight. I can't remember what year. I want to say 82, give or take. Yep. Yeah, Don Arden was the manager. Some people don't mention Arden as Black Sabbath's manager. I don't know why that is. I've seen articles where they kind of just sidestep that. I'm like, no, he was. Yep. Don's daughter, Sharon, is Sharon Osbourne now. Yep. That's the connection there. Is there anything else? Yeah, there's some other stuff here. Looking back, I should have died 1,000 times. How true is that? It's amazing. Like, he really was like a Keith Richards in that regard, except for Ozzy ultimately did die. But Keith Richards is still alive. How is that? I'm not going to make the boomer joke there, but, it's true. Yeah. Yeah. Again, some of the dark side of Ozzy, the abuse at home. Sharon put up with a lot. It's kind of crazy. And she did. And I know there's a lot of people that can easily vilify Sharon. There are very many reasons to vilify Sharon regarding some royalties to other band members and being screwed out of credits. We're probably going to get into that later. But yeah, but it is funny. I've been kind of watching a lot of the footage, this sort of post Ozzy passing, and also some social media stuff. And Sharon's all of a sudden acquired sainthood at this point from a lot of people, which is pretty amazing. Go look on the internet. It's like she's almost been forgiven because she's sad about her husband's death, and people feel some pathos with that. I don't know. It's an interesting cultural phenomenon that's happening right now. Yeah, the Osbournes TV show. I did like it, but again, you had to get over the fact that Ozzy was flawed and human, right? But also struggling with his own stuff. And then just try to enjoy the show as a comedy, right? I wonder how much Ozzy really knew he was part of the comedy. I think he did. I'd like to think he did, right? Yeah. And of course, reality TV shows aren't real. I mean, there's a lot of scripting. There's a lot of, producers kind of massaging the direction that certain plots are going, right? So yeah, it's not real. We all know that. But yeah, the Osbournes was the reason why Gene Simmons did Gene Simmons Family Jewels. He even admits that in recent interviews. And others, right? The Kardashians and stuff, right? I mean, Ozzy kind of started a lot of, look how 2000s those kids look. My God. Amazing. Jack's going to skateboard away. Yep. What else do we got here? Of course, we know about the Hell Struggles. So here are the Grammys. 1993, I Don't Want to Change the World. It was a good story about I Want to Change the World. He and Zach I forgot what it was. Oh, can't remember. Pointless to bring it up. But there is a story. You can go look it up and remind me in the comments. 2 more Grammys. Recently is 2023. Yeah, best rock album performance. It's interesting how later in life some of these accolades and awards are, because I'm like, it's those last two albums we're talking about, and I'm like, he probably should have been praised a lot more officially with real awards for stuff he did farther back as well. Right. Like Diary of a Madman is a perfect goddamn album. That album should have, yeah, yeah. I'm not going to go on and on about Diary of a Madman. We all know it's my favorite Ozzy album. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's sad to read the responses from Geezer and Bill and Iommi. Yeah, really sad. The Parkinson's. Um, yeah, what is this? Osbourne said he would die a happy man if he could perform one more show to express his gratitude to the fans from the stage. Yep, I'm going to talk a lot more about that later on for sure. And that's the end of that article. Quickly, I'm just going to go to the final article here. Again, we're going to fly through these because I don't want to spend lots and lots of time doing this particular segment, as if you need to know that. Let's see, 2 weeks after, yeah. 5.8 million metalheads around the world watched the Back to the Beginning show online. I was one of them. I watched all 10 hours, believe it or not. Pretty crazy. It was just on all day in my house. Yeah. And I'm going to talk about my response to that when we get to some albums and stuff. But yeah, I am preparing you for a lot, aren't I? I'm saying I'm going to do this and that later, because I'm just responding to these articles. That's the gig now. So, yeah, let's see. Unable to walk. Yep. Yeah. Anyways, I don't think there's much more to really go through here. Yeah, here we go. Ozzy says, I do count my lucky stars. I don't know why I'm still here, and I do sometimes think I'm on borrowed time. You were. I said to Sharon the other day, what a great fucking life we've had, and what a great fucking experience. And yeah, that's the joy that I think a lot of fans can take away, in this moment where people are otherwise really sad about Ozzy being gone, is that he had a great fucking life. And you got to say fuck too, because it's Ozzy, right? Right. Emphasizes it. Yeah, December, he would have been 77. The fourth of six children of a poor family. Yeah. Wouldn't amount to anything, much less an idol to millions. It's a great story. You know, riddled with the drug abuse and the craziness and all that, but good story, right? Yeah. Again, I'm just flipping through this. I love this. This was the who said this quote? I can't remember. I remember playing in the Crown Pub in Birmingham and thinking this will be good for a couple of years. Drink a few beers and have a jam. The ride lasted considerably longer. I love that. Yeah, Paranoid, breakthrough song. I was about 3 years old when that came out, so I don't remember it. The critics were not kind at first. Black Sabbath dismissed as some kind of satanic claptrap and worse. Interesting era. You thought more of that would have been the case in the 80s for his solo career, which a little bit of it was, and all that. The worst of the counterculture on a plastic platter. Yeah, the critics were not kind to Black Sabbath in the early days. I think they didn't see what we see now, or even like not too much later, right? And, it didn't take Black Sabbath long to take over the world in a lot of real significant ways, especially in the music world. Yep, known as heavy metal. Yeah. Yep. So I'm just gonna flip through some of this. Yeah, talk about Ozzy's voice. Yeah, this is technically speaking at a natural tenor, good range, and a powerful vocal. So Ozzy's voice, I used to bust on Ozzy's voice a lot. Like, and there are reasons too. I mean, if you hear, there are recordings that were done at the first New York show for Speak of the Devil, where you hear the unsweetened up vocals, like they re-recorded Ozzy's vocals for that record. We're going to talk about that when we get to Speak of the Devil. And so Ozzy wasn't a perfect vocalist, but when he was on, he was really on. And I think some of the early Sabbath albums, you hear it. I think there's some stuff in the early Ozzy albums as well where you can really, really hear it. So I've kind of turned around about Ozzy's voice. I don't think it's so bad. I think when he had his moments, he had real moments that were pretty amazing. He might have had a little bit of studio sweetening, but I think overall I'm kind of good with his voice and even really love it to some degree. Again, it took me years to kind of come around to that, because I always felt that it was otherwise the weak spot in some of the albums that he did. Especially in light of the really amazing guitar players he had, right? Because sometimes you're paying a little more attention to that, depending on where you come from musically. Let's see what we got. Cocaine, liquor. I love this. Osbourne's uncanny ability to consume prodigious amounts of cocaine and liquor and not die. Yeah, yeah. Would lead scientists in 2011 to conclude that he was a genetic mutant whose body possessed a unique ability to absorb recreational drugs. I never knew this existed. This is an amazing assertion. Have you ever read this? Because I haven't. Okay, we'll take it. Sharon says, I've always said at the end of the world there will be Roaches, Ozzy, and Keith Richards. Right. Unfortunately, we'll still have Roaches. And this is a quote from The Guardian. Let's see. Yeah, more of the history stuff. Again, you can read it later. Yeah. It was not a live bat. It was a dead bat. Right there. Live bat. Dead bat. The PETA thing is interesting. PETA did issued a statement, and what do they say? Ozzy will be missed by animal advocates the world over. So, some people change their tune, I guess. Yeah, didn't have so much of a problem with that. Of course, again, the Motley Crue tour, the infamous Motley Crue tour, the bizarre contest they had with each other. I love Nikki Sixx's quote, "We thought we could compete with that, but you can't compete with Ozzy. He won." Yeah. Yep. And in the 90s, Osbourne's popularity was fading, and then the show happened, and he was revived. It's pretty amazing. I think Gene Simmons took a tip or two from that playbook. Yeah, for sure. Because, Kiss wasn't doing great in the 2000s either. Let's be honest. I don't know if there's much more here. Yeah, the Birmingham show sold out the Back to the Beginning after the box open, so I went immediately. I believe it. I would have liked to have gone to that show. I mean, time and money were really the things. But it would have been really cool. At first when I got the pay-per-view, and before I got the pay-per-view, I should say, I was like, well, is this show going to be really anything? I mean, is this just going to be a train wreck? And then I watched it, and then we got to the Ozzy and Black Sabbath parts, and I was like, this is really good. I mean, it's better than I thought it would be entirely. And now I want it on, DVD or video or whatever you kids call it now, whatever you watch videos on. And I do know there is one in the making, like they're working on a Back to the Beginning home video. So that is coming. I did read that recently. I love it. I've got no complaints. At least I'll be remembered. Amazing. So those were the articles, and there was definitely some standout stuff there. But what constantly stands out for me regarding Ozzy is that he really is a figure that managed to succeed in the face of some pretty bad odds. I mean, he was kicked out of Black Sabbath back in 1979, only to rise as a solo artist, and then surpass his old band at that time by becoming even bigger. Not bad for a poor dyslexic kid from the streets of Birmingham who could have otherwise ended up in a factory job for the rest of his life. And I feel that a lot of fans who might also feel the odds are against them might find some inspiration in Ozzy's unconquerable soul. Whether you were the bullied kid who became a successful businessman or the troubled teen who overcame his demons and found happiness, you know that Ozzy wrestled with his own issues and somehow came out on top. It's an incredible story and one that really contextualizes the classic era of Black Sabbath and Ozzy's fledgling band to follow. And of course, Ozzy and early Sabbath inspired countless subgenres of metal, and even some singers directly. I mean, the list is long, but some of the more obvious bands include Witchfinder General, Trouble, Pentagram, Electric Wizard, Candlemass, St. Vitus, Pagan Altar, and many others. In fact, you could easily credit Sabbath for spawning doom metal's core sound, as well as musical elements, imagery, and lyrical content for an endless stream of heavy, thrash, speed, death, and black metal bands to come. As many have said, the entirety of heavy metal traces back to Black Sabbath. And to the naysayers who prattle on about other bands preceding Sabbath as being relevant or crucial to the conversation, they simply don't matter when you take into account that Sabbath had an actual consistency in their heavy sound and dark lyrics, when the other bands lightly dabbled in it at most. And I'm looking at you, Led Zeppelin. Also, Iommi's unique guitar tone and delivery was far heavier, darker, and down-tuned than his contemporaries, the latter of whom sounding upbeat and chipper by comparison. Add to that the sheer impact of metal bands the follow is undeniably coming from Black Sabbath, with other acts of the time having a far smaller influence at best. I mean, face it, Sabbath invented metal, and it's desperate and embarrassing to claim otherwise. And some of that might explain the huge amount of attention Ozzy's death has received, even eclipsing other dead music celebrities. A friend of mine had mentioned David Bowie in that context, which is still rather mind-blowing. And speaking of celebrities, some rather surprising ones came out and offered their online respects to the Prince of Darkness, including Lady Gaga, Cyndi Lauper, Gary Newman, Flava Flav, Duran Duran, Adam Sandler, Mick Jones of Foreigner, Billy Idol, Robert Plant, Ice-T, the Pixies, and even the folks at the goddamn Alamo in Texas paid respects. Incredible. Of course, all of this outpouring of attention for Ozzy does remind me of just how strong and loyal this metal community of ours is. I mean, it shouldn't be any secret that metal fans are the most dedicated fans in the world, bar none. I mean, sure, fans of other genres love their music, but there's simply no comparison. Metal fans don't just listen to music, we live it. We're the ones who can rattle off entire discographies, travel great distances to see bands, wear a representation on a full-time basis, feel intense camaraderie with other metal fans, and plenty of other evidence that this music really means the world to us and isn't merely some trend or flavor of the month. And given that devotion, I'm pretty sure that some of Ozzy's songs will be a little sad to listen to in the coming weeks, especially when we get to See You on the Other Side, Goodbye to Romance, and especially Mama, I'm Coming Home. And that last one does remind me of his final performance of the track during the Back to the Beginning charity event, a little over 2 weeks before he passed. When he broke into that song, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, and including this house, admittedly. Not sure what others thought at that moment, but I definitely felt not just the end of two iconic bands, but of Ozzy himself. I mean, I knew this was his swan song and could already feel the loss settling in, or simply preparing me for what would come. Even Iommi stated in an interview that he felt Ozzy really just held out to do that show. I mean, despite the years-long struggle Ozzy had with his illness, he still gave it his all, and I'm glad he got to have that moment, and that we all got to say goodbye in the most metal way possible. Rest in peace, Ozzy Osbourne. But don't go away yet, because I also wanted to take some time to chat about some of the memories of Ozzy's music, both with Black Sabbath and his solo band. And I'll be doing that in the order in which I discovered some of these early albums. So yeah, we're going to jump around just a little bit. Funny enough, I actually didn't hear Sabbath first. Rather, it was both Ozzy's debut album, Blizzard of Oz, and his live album, Speak of the Devil, that were my introductions to his music. But let's talk about this one first. As I mentioned, Blizzard of Oz was Ozzy's debut studio album, released in 1980 in the UK and 1981 in the US by Jet Records. Also released on 8-track tape when that format was still around, but not for long, of course. Anyways, Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley were the singles, and the album went 5 times platinum in the States. So, just to discuss how I found these two albums, and I literally found them. I was 14 at the time. I was in high school in a very small town in rural Utah. My buddy Ken and I were always looking for trouble, basically. We were in the high school building at the end of school. It was after hours. And so we're roaming around looking to see what trouble we could get into. And for some reason, we had to cut through the weightlifting room near the gym. And on one of the benches, one of the weight benches, was the cassettes of these two albums. And I was like, this is amazing, right? So I snagged them. And I guess what's funny about that is that I did do a video, the Metal Origins Story video, part 1, where I talked about, or I just realized in the video that I had really stolen maybe the first half a dozen metal albums I ever heard, which is kind of interesting, but pretty cool. I do want to go through some tracks here. I Don't Know, I actually liked a lot more than Crazy Train when I first got this record. Of course, I love Mr. Crowley a lot. And I loved Revelation Mother Earth quite a bit. It's kind of interesting. Some of the other songs I was good with, but wasn't excited about until later. And I always love Ozzy when he goes creepy. Like Mr. Crowley's one of those tracks, Waiting for Darkness. Diary of Madman, we'll probably get to some of those a little bit later. Yeah, but pretty cool. Blizzard of Oz, great album. As for Speak of the Devil, it was released in 1982 by Jet Records and is a live performance of Ozzy and his band doing Black Sabbath tracks. In the UK, it's called Talk of the Devil because that's how the expression is said over there. Paranoid was the single with Symptom of the Universe on the B-side. Album also went platinum in the United States, which is decent for a live album. It's also known that most of Ozzy's vocals had to be redone because of his singing quality during one of the shows. And that's shows plural because 2 nights were recorded, one with an audience and one without, the latter which is where they got Ozzy's vocals. Anyways, this album always reminds me of a story, one I think I might have told in one other video, but it's relevant here, so I got to tell it again. It was probably about spring of 1983, and my mom had gone out for the weekend, left me alone in the house, and I'm usually a pretty good kid. I usually don't act up, but except for this one moment where I thought it'd be really fun to go for a joyride, and my mom had left behind her amazing custom van. This thing was magenta and silver, had full velour and carpet in it, amazing custom van, probably what Danny Zuko might call a pussy wagon, to invoke Grease. Amazing. So I found the keys and I got in the van. I'm sitting there in the driver's side. I'm like, wait a minute. This moment of Teen Rebellion needs a soundtrack. So I instantly thought of this album, probably for a number of reasons. I think one is because a live album has that real interactive sense to it. You can kind of feel like you're there and getting into it kind of thing. So I come back in. I had the cassette copy, obviously, as I said. Put it in, I could hear the crowd slowly build up. Ozzy, right? And it's just getting me going. And I had started the car and I'm kind of revving, the gas pedal a bit as it's building up. And then that lead riff especially, I'm just gunning it more. And then I remember when the bass and drums and the whole song proper kicks in, I basically just jammed it in reverse and spun out in the cul-de-sac behind me, spun completely around, put it in forward, and just took off. And it was the most amazing thing. I had never driven an automobile in my life until this very moment. I'm 14 and a half at this point. So I'm driving around this little tiny town in Utah, trying to find all my friends because I need them to see me doing this. And I couldn't find a single one of them. I went everywhere. I was out and about for maybe 4 hours total. Couldn't find anyone. So I ended up driving to the next town and hanging out at this Mexican restaurant called Taco Time. And I remember playing Dig Dug for hours till I ran out of quarters. And then I got back in the van and drove home, which is kind of anticlimactic once you really think about it. But I really remember the sense of driving and just driving really fast and listening to this album and just being really into it, being really exhilarated by it. And, Ozzy has so much to do with that, right? And this performance here in general. It was really funny. I remember years later, I told my mother this story and I do recommend this for people. If you're in your 20s or 30s, you should really tell your parents all the stories you got away with. And I told her this whole story and she's like, how did I not know you did this? And I was like, well, you remember the little decorative rocks in the front lawn, the little granite rocks? Before I pulled out, I lined them up where the 4 wheels of the van were. And then when I came back, I pulled back into the exact same spot. It took me about 3 tries, but I did it. So pretty amazing. I definitely recommend you should tell your parents all the stuff you got away with. It's fun and you can watch them cringe. It's a great time. Anyways, tracks on this one that I love, of course, Symptom of the Universe, right? Also, NIB on here is really killer. Back then, I actually preferred this version of NIB to the Sabbath one. And that's true for a number of these songs. I would change my mind on a couple of them later when I heard the originals a little bit more. But really cool stuff. You can also see the insert with Ozzy here with Ronnie the Midget, named after Ronnie James Dio. We all know that story. This always bugged me about all this space up here. I don't know why. Should have done something with it. Crazy. Anyways, there it is, Ozzy, Speak of the Devil. Next album I discovered was the second studio album for Black Sabbath, entitled Paranoid and released in 1970 by Warner Brothers. Singles were released for the title track as well as for Iron Man. And the album did go to 4 times platinum in the United States. And my personal story here with this one is pretty simple. It was still the spring of 1983. I was hanging out with my buddy Jim, my best friend at the time. We got into all sorts of trouble together. I remember his dad was this kind of tough biker dude. He was into Southern rock, but he also listened to a lot of sort of early heavy metal stuff, including Black Sabbath. And I remember telling Jim I wanted to hear an actual Black Sabbath album. So he borrowed this album on cassette from his dad. I don't think he told him. And so I got to hear the album, And I gotta say, it didn't initially sink in. It wasn't the album that really turned me on to Black Sabbath officially, and I kind of don't know why. I kind of theorized about it later in life. I think what was happening was that I was very attuned to sort of the 80s sound of music, the whole like flashy guitar work, from Speak of the Devil, for instance, and that kind of thing. So the album initially sounded a little bit like my parents' music. It sounded maybe a little hippie, but mostly like my parents' music. I got over that. By the end of the year, I got over that when we get to the next Sabbath album I'm going to talk about. That's about 3 albums off at this point. But yeah, so years later, I would come to like this album quite a bit, especially the deep cuts. I really love Planet Caravan and Electric Funeral quite a bit, but also a big fan of Fairies Wear Boots, which is, a hit, but great song. I definitely love this album. It took me some time. It definitely did. I've always hated the cover. I think most people did, but there you go. Anyways, Paranoid. Next album is a little out of sequence here, and that's Ozzy's second studio album, Diary of a Madman, released in 1981 by Jet Records. The singles were Flying High Again, Over the Mountain, and Tonight, with the album ultimately reaching 3 times platinum here in the States. Of course, final album with guitarist Randy Rhoads before he was killed in a plane crash in March of 1982. There was also the debacle of a remix version of this album from 2002, from which the original bass and drum tracks were temporarily replaced, believed to be a retaliatory act by the Osbournes for the lawsuits from original drummer Lee Kirkslake and original bassist Bob Daisley. But in 2011, the original bass and drum work were put back in, so I guess maybe all is well? Kinda? Probably not. Anyways, how I discovered this album, it was through my buddy Mike. This is probably December 83. I had come back to Worcester, Massachusetts, kind of hooked up with him, and it was fun. He was introducing me to a whole lot of like music that I hadn't discovered before. I was already into Def Leppard, I remember, with Pyromania, but he had a copy of On Through the Night. Wasn't really into it in the beginning. It took me a while to warm up to that record. But he also had this album, and I was pretty excited about that. And so I actually taped it off of him. And in fact, I still have the original cassette from 1983. I don't know 42 years later how I still have this tape, but I do. It also has Black Sabbath Master Reality on the B-side, which I taped off myself. And we will be getting to that album in a few, for sure. But yeah, still have this cassette. It still plays. It's amazing. Anyways, back to this album. This is my favorite Ozzy Osbourne album. I've probably mentioned that in this video somewhere, right? And great tracks. Of course, I do love Over the Mountain more than Flying High Again. Flying High Again is definitely the single. You can kind of hear it in a lot of ways. Believer is such a cool song with that intro bass line. Bob Daisley, just amazing. Also, the title track, Diary of a Madman, is pretty cool. Of course, we do know that Bob Daisley and Lee Kirkslake, as I said, were on this record, but they're not credited. Instead, it's Tommy Aldridge on drums and Rudy Sarzo on bass, which isn't true. In case you didn't know that. But yeah, such a great album. Little Louis Osbourne in the corner, in case you didn't know that. Yeah, very cool album. Ozzy, Diary of a Madman. Favorite album. After that, we have Ozzy's third studio album, Bark at the Moon, released in 1983 by CBS Records. Singles were Bark at the Moon and Tired, with the album ultimately hitting 3 times platinum in the United States. I do remember seeing the music video for the title track for this one. It's probably how I discovered it. And I definitely ran out immediately to get the album, which I believe I had on cassette first. And yes, more business shenanigans involving this record, as guitarist Jakey Lee maintained that he was cheated out of credit by the Osbournes for composing much of the album's music. Anyways, the tour for this album was my very first metal show, as I did mention. Quick little precursor to that one, though. I was in social studies class. This is definitely April of 84. And this kid in front of me, his name was Joe. He had just moved to the United States from Puerto Rico. His English was no too good, if I remember correctly. But he had 2 tickets to see Ozzy at the Centrum in Worcester, Mass. And he sold me the other ticket. Don't know why he didn't take his brother. Not sure why. But he sold the ticket to me. We went to the show. We had the best time. I mean, it was my first metal show, so I was pretty excited about that. But also, we really bonded. It was really cool. And he and I became instant best friends. We're best friends to this day. It's very, very cool. So, in a lot of respects, when I hear Bark at the Moon, I think of the tour, but I also think of my friendship with Joe, which is very awesome. Gotta have the metal friends, right? So anyways, tracks on this one. I love the title track a lot. When I first got the album, Rock and Roll Rebel was actually my favorite. But I gotta say, my very favorite song on this album, and it's probably my top 3 Ozzy songs of all time. It could be my very favorite, maybe next to Diary of a Madman, is Waiting for Darkness. I love this song so much. Again, Ozzy, when he gets creepy, is fantastic. There's some other good stuff on here too. Now You See It, Now You Don't is kind of fun. Center of Eternity is decent. And some other tracks here as well. But definitely title track and Waiting for Darkness are the ones that really do it for me on this album. Anyways, there it is. Bark at the Moon. And great makeup, by the way. Next up is Black Sabbath's third studio album entitled Master of Reality, released in 1971 by Warner Brothers in the US, or Vertigo in the UK, take your pick. The single from this one was Children of the Grave, and the album went 2 times platinum here. And yes, this is the album that officially got me into Black Sabbath. I am a little fuzzy about how I discovered this record, but I think it might have had something to do with both really digging Children of the Grave and Sweetly from Speak of the Devil, and that I had just tried pot earlier in the month, admittedly. I do remember hearing the album for the first time and just being blown away by how dark and doomy it was, which is to say that I totally blind bought this one. And that's when I decided that I really wanted to hear a whole lot more of this band. Simple story, really. As for tracks on it, Sweet Leaf is one of my very favorite songs, even though I don't smoke pot anymore and really didn't smoke it much past my teen years, to be honest. Children of the Grave, of course, amazing song. I love Into the Void, the final song. It's really an amazing song. But everything on here is pretty cool. I love this album a lot. Interesting that the lyrics are on the back jacket. You don't see that a lot. And it was one of the things the PMRC wanted in the 1980s. They wanted to be able to read all the lyrics, right? Well, there they are, Tipper, right? Amazing. Amazing album. Even Embryo and Orchid, the instrumentals, are fine. They kind of fit with the record in an interesting way. But yeah, there it is. Master of Reality. Killer album. After that, we have the Black Sabbath compilation album We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll, released in 1976 by Warner Brothers here in the US. And although there wouldn't be any singles for this, since it is a compilation, it did reach 2 times platinum here in America. As for discovering this album, I definitely remember how I first got this one. It involves a little bit of a story, a little precursor here for sure. Outside of Worcester, there's a town called Auburn, mostly famous for the Auburn Mall, but some other things as well. My aunt worked at this place with a couple of guys. I think they were kind of social workers of sorts. And it was a place for like troubled teens to come to maybe get help with their homework, get on a career path, things like that. Most of the kids were metal kids, I remember. And my aunt was like, you should come visit one day. And, you know, there's some kids here you'd probably get along with. You like the same music. And so occasionally I would actually just go down there and hang out. And it's funny because I remember I managed a band with one of the kids a couple years later, ended up jamming with another one of those kids like 3 years later. So they ended up kind of friends. We used to talk about metal a lot. We had a little boombox. We'd play tapes from the bands of the time. But we really got into this subject of Black Sabbath. And I was like, you know, I've got Master of Reality. I really love it. I'd love to hear some more. And they're like, why don't you just go to Strawberries Records and Tapes? It's literally around the corner. So I did. So I did that. And I walked in the store and I located the clerk who looked the most metal. He had the hair. He looked kind of cool. So I walked up to him and like, listen, I'm really into Black Sabbath now. I just got Master of Reality. What's my next Sabbath record? Tell me now. And he's like, well, I think you should probably get the compilation album, which is kind of unexpected, right? So he's like, this will put you on your path. He basically like, there's songs from a lot of the early Sabbath albums, and you'll get a sense of where Black Sabbath went throughout the 70s, at least up to, 76. And so I was like, this is awesome. So I got the record, and what was really cool about it is this is the first time I ever heard the original version of the song Black Sabbath. For the very first time was on here, because it opens with it. Yeah. And I definitely realized that it was much better than the Ozzy version on Speak of the Devil. I loved it. And I must have played it over and over again. Just so amazing. So many favorites on here. I love The Wizard. Great song. Tomorrow's Dream is decent. Changes. Some people don't like Changes. I actually think it's a decent track. There's some other stuff on here too. Of course, NIB is on here. Again, I kind of liked the Speak of the Devil version a little bit better, but I grew to really appreciate this one quite a bit. Yeah. So there it is. The compilation album known as We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll. And then we have Ozzy's fourth studio album, The Ultimate Sin, released in 1986 by CBS Records. Shot in the Dark and The Ultimate Sin were the singles, and the album reached 2 times platinum in the States. And this was definitely one of those mainstream metal albums that definitely reminds me a lot of 1986 specifically. I mean, getting kicked out of high school, going to Reno to finish up my diploma, the parties, the girls, all of that. In fact, The Ultimate Sin might just make it to my Reno albums video in the future. That'll be a lot of fun with some cool stories and some cool albums. Definitely keep an eye out for that. Sadly, I did not see this tour when Ozzy went out with Metallica, as I was out west when they were playing the East Coast. Of course, my Worcester friends all got to meet Metallica before the show, including meeting Cliff Burton, get their copies of Master of Puppets autographed and all that. It's possible I get that lorded over me to this very day. Anyways, as for this album, I just want to go through some tracks first. And they're out of order. I love that on the back here. I love the title track, The Ultimate Sin, great song. I think Fool Like You is one of the best ones. Some really cool guitar work from Jakey Lee on that one. Thank God for the Bomb is fine. Killer Giants isn't too bad. There's some good stuff on here. Yeah, it's good stuff. But what this album definitely reminds me the most of is a story in Reno. I was hanging out with friends of a friend of mine. We're in the trailer park, hanging out in a really messy trailer. I mean, there was just shit everywhere, I remember. And one of the guys that was there, he had a girlfriend who worked at the hospital, and she scored a couple tanks of nitrous oxide. So we're listening to this album. We played it a few times, actually, I remember. So that's why it's associated with this story. I took a couple hits of nitrous because I was 17, and that was my experimental year. And I was like, wow, this is great. And then I thought to myself, you know who would really enjoy this is this girl I know. This girl, Melissa was her name. She and I worked at Circus up in the Midway. And I knew she was working that day. So I filled up a balloon. They had a bunch of balloons. That's how they were doing the hits. And filled it up with nitrous and jumped on the city bus, went downtown, walked into Circus, walked straight up to her. And I was like, listen, you need to take a hit of this now. And she's like, what's in it? I'm like, don't ask, just hit. So she puts it in her mouth, sucks the whole thing down, and she's just like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm like, enjoy your shift. And then I left. I don't know if I thought I was a cool guy or whatever. Probably wasn't, realistically. But fun little story. She was a cool girl. I'm probably not going to talk about her in the Reno video too much. I had a main girl. This was kind of a side girl and all that. Maybe I'll get into that later. Maybe I won't. Anyways, I just had to mention the connection to that because The Ultimate Sin always reminds me of that moment. It also reminds me of Reno quite a bit too. In fact, I might mention it in the Reno albums video, at least as a footnote. So anyways, The Ultimate Sin. Look at that beastie fucker. And I'll stop there with the albums since those were the ones that had the most memories for me as a kid. Definitely let me know what your favorite Ozzy or Ozzy-fronted Black Sabbath albums are. And if interested, I made a top 20 favorite Black Sabbath songs video about 4 months back, maybe 5, in which I go into depth on actual tracks. I'll link that one at the end of this video, so you can definitely check that out. Also, I did want to show my Ozzy Osbourne mug here briefly. There it is. I have no idea how I got this mug. It's definitely back in the mid-'80s. It might have been at a carnival. I might have won it, or I bought it at Spencer Gifts, or I got it some other way. But through all the years, I mean, it's been 40 years, I still have it through all the moves and all of that stuff. So from my teenage years, there it is. Ozzy Osbourne, the mug. Anyways, I hope everyone enjoyed the salute to the Madman himself. But of course, reaction videos aren't the only thing I do here at the Accusation Network. Generally do videos on metal vinyl collecting, but also classic and modern metal in general. If that sounds like something that's really cool to you and you have yet to subscribe to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. Also, maybe give this video a like, and of course, share my videos out with your friends on social media. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.